All right. So what's going on with you, Stu?
Yeah, great question. Big day. Life is good. New house purchased. Ready to. I think we finally found our forever home. So things are pretty good. Got a conference to go to today. It's rare that you'll ever see me in a collar shirt and a blazer. So yeah, things are good. How are you, Connor?
Well, that's great, man. You are living the American dream. You are somewhere in Connecticut with now 2 kids, a forever home, and a thriving business. Congratulations. You've succeeded. You have won the game
I
of life.
am the statistic, right? I am the statistic. Though it's all good and well. Idealizing this, that now the stress is in of watching all the the process and Bridget and her design plans and everything like that. Yeah, it's all good fun.
Absolutely. All right, Stu. So besides the new house and Halloween on Friday, everything good?
Life is good. New addition, getting settled into a routine, but yeah, things are great. Starting to get into festive season, and yeah, it's awesome.
Well, before we dive into our guest here, I just got to say, you in a jacket in this, I've not seen this before. So you said a conference, like where are you speaking at? What brings you to somewhere not Connecticut?
Yeah, so today I'm in Jersey. I'm going into New York City shortly. There is a HSBC sponsoring a cyber innovation event with some of the best CISOs and security products in the game. By the time this is launched, this will have happened. So I'm hoping the event was and is a great success. But some incredible companies speaking, some incredible talkers. They're doing it in partnership with AWS, the New York Stock Exchange, Andreessen Horowitz, Night Dragon, Sin Ventures, Ballistic Ventures, Notable Capitals. So some pretty heavy hitters. Hampton North also will be in attendance and representing, but should be a really good event. And HSBC know how to throw a conference. For those listening, there is a sister event in San Francisco next Wednesday, November 5th. So if you want attendance, drop me a message. I know the team over there pretty well. So if you're a security leader looking to attend a conference in San Francisco, let me know.
That's awesome. And I think you win the game of name dropping on this year's podcast. So that's a hell of a
and
lineup.
Hampton North.
And Hampton North.
Said right others.
Let's go with it. All right. So speaking of heavy hitters, I'm really excited about the guests we got today. So without further ado, let's bring on Ira.
Good morning.
Good morning, Ira. How are you doing today?
Awesome. How are you guys?
Well, we are excited and ready to rock for today. So just by way of introduction for the audience to get to know you a little better, Ira, you're the executive chair and CEO of UltraViolet Cyber and the founder and CEO of Kernel Advisory, services operator and deal maker who scaled both the Herjavec Group into global operations. Now you're in the space of fusing MDR, AppSec, CTEM at UltraViolet while advisoring and sponsors of strategic cyber M&A. So Ira, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me. Really happy to be here.
Heck of an intro, but I don't think it does it justice either. Ira moves in great circles. He's a community builder, like knows a lot of people, is very generous with his time to the communities. Yeah, that intro I don't think quite does justice, but yeah, pumped to have you on the pod.
And there is one thing I forgot. You are the official tour guide of Toronto, by the way.
Yeah, go Blue Jays. How about that World Series?
That's it. That is it. Big time. He also hosts the best, if you ever get the nod, the best dinners at RSA, but it's a very, very select community, but the best dinners.
There's some recent activity that's been happening in your neck of the woods. So I want to get into the M&A space, also get your view on the M&A space inside cybersecurity. So we often get people on the podcast who are incredibly good as cybersecurity operators, or they're really sitting the frontier of where security and AI are going to come together. What I love about your particular background is you really bring together the engine of the business of cybersecurity, and you can see all these different angles, both as an operator, as an advisor. So let's kick into the first thing I want to talk about, which is around cyber. Your company, UltraViolet Cyber, acquired BlackDuck's application security and testing business. So this was an AppSec carve-out that really signals where unified security operations is heading, right? Tighter feedback loops from code, cloud, detection, and response. So I want to talk about that deal, but before we unpack it, I want to also zoom out. Like I said earlier, you've led M&A from inside as a COO at Herjavec Group. You now advise investors through Kernel. So clearly we're in the moment and the season of M&A. I was reading through Kroll's M&A update, which they dropped mid-August, and they highlighted some headline items like Proofpoint's acquisition of Hornet Security, which was almost $1 billion. Palo Alto's acquisition of CyberArk, which was another $25 billion. F5 acquired Fletch. By the way, shout out to Grant and the Fletch team. Grant is an excellent operator. And Sneak acquired Invariant Labs. So I wanted to get your view. What is the role of a security leader through an M&A process? And I say that because I often see security being treated as like this back office checklist. Like, did we find any breaches? When in reality, I think the role of the CISO might be more towards evaluating enterprise resiliency. So, Ira, with that, I just want to get your perspective as a CISO in a company that might be going through A. How do we show up to make this to be a really effective leaders in that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting topic, and I'm always excited to talk about this because there's the public narrative around M&A and cyber, and I think we see all these great publications, and our friends at Altitude Cyber have our great weekly deal review, and you see all these deals happening, and you see them come out, and you really think, what was behind this? And I think the lens for security leaders in M&A is really the same lens for security leaders in business writ large, which is, how do you become a business enabler? Like, are you a cost center, and are you in kind of the old school way of, I'm fighting for dollars and I'm, kind of no negativity towards IT, but being an IT security leader, or are you really driving this business forward? And I think the same is true in M&A. We've seen, whether it's cyber M&A, so acquiring a cyber company, or whether you're a security leader in an organization and your business is acquiring another business, there's a horizontal cyber lens through everything, as we know. So number one as a security leader is, do you have a seat at the table? And if you don't have a seat at the table, I've spoken to many CISOs in the past who say to me, oh, maybe we're owned by private equity, or even we're a public company, and we find out about this the week before it happens, or we don't really have a lot of lead time and we got to hustle and we got to get ingrained in that. I think number one is getting a seat at the table. So who is driving corp dev in your organization? Is it a dedicated M&A team? Is it your CEO? Why do they not want your opinion months and weeks before these deals happen? Because they take years sometimes to come together. And you got to fix that, number one. And then number two, tactically, once you're engaged in a deal, it's a risk management game like anything else. Like, I think M&A is the pinnacle of risk management, which is to say, what is the risk and what is the reward of us doing this? We think the reward outweighs the risk, so we're going to do this deal. You as a security leader need to make sure that your risk register that you've put together on this deal, even outside in, without getting to talk to the company, without getting any of their materials, we can all look at an organization based on what their attack surface looks like publicly, what type of business they're in, what we think the risks are, and say, hey, I know we're contemplating a transaction in this space, whether we're a retailer or a utility or really any industry. This is what the typical risks are. This is what we want to look for. And, let's make sure we're at the table so that we can ensure our company gets the most value out of this acquisition. And so security leaders need to think in that context in order to be successful here, I think.
I think that's really insightful, that sense of like, if you have a seat at the table, if the coach puts you on the field, how are you going to act like that athlete and show up and perform?
Yeah.
Right. Versus saying, I want to get on the field, and you get on the field and you forgot to tie your shoelaces. So I really think that is a really good insight there. And I'd love to get your perspective if you have one on this. It's the other side of this too. There's the M&A, like the diligence, and a lot of the M&A, I think, gets focused on the weeks and months of like deal diligence, that not weeks, obviously months or years of diligence that goes forward. But on the other side, you have the transition services agreement that when you're trying to merge these two companies together, you're trying to find synergies in the operations. I found a lot of my time in my previous company, it was about 50-50. Like, I was doing a ton of security diligence and technology diligence, integration diligence. We got to signing and everyone else got to go home. And then it's like me and the rest of the engineering teams are like, all right, let's spend the next 3 months making these companies work, or 6 months making these companies work together well and getting those. So there's the other side of that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think sometimes it can be weeks, the diligence, like we've seen deals get done very quickly, and that's sometimes a competitive advantage in an auction type of process. But the more you can do in diligence, the better prepared you are for integration afterwards, whether there's a carve out in a transition services agreement or whether you just have the whole thing on day two, and your responsibility is putting that roadmap together to get unified controls. Like, I mean, we all, you have an enterprise security controls framework. How do you unify those not only across business units, but then you have M&A and something new? And, some of it is people and some of it is obviously technology and process, but I think people is a key part of it. Do you have the right people in the seats who can handle this? And not only from their own capability, and I know, Stu, this is kind of your bailiwick, but are the people that you have great at managing security for the business you have today? Tomorrow, after a deal the company looks like this, the framework is different. Maybe those people have the capability to do it, but do they have the capacity to do it? Is it just well, we need to add more people? That's kind of the easy knee-jerk reaction, which we know CEOs the world over now are very proud to say publicly how many people they're reducing due to AI, not how many people they're adding. So just saying we need more people because we're acquiring a new business doesn't really fly anymore. So what are you going to change about what your people do today and how they work so that they can accommodate this? Do you have those right people? And if not, do you have a partner, a network to find those right people? Because it's a unique type of person that, if you've never gone through this before, you can figure it out, but it is quite helpful to have people who have had the scars and mistakes of bad integrations and bad M&A, because it makes you much better once you've gone through that.
Yeah. The change management of a situation like this is, I think, very much overlooked. But I think being able to successfully manage an M&A cycle, it's, everyone's worried, right? Everyone doesn't know what their future company is going to look like. Everyone's worried about themselves in terms of what it means for them. They were hired for one thing, it might change, and role consolidation is real. It's a nervous time, and I think if you have those battle scars, it's super useful. Taking it back one step, do you think the skill set of a CISO and a cybersecurity leader actually lends itself well to being an M&A specialist? Because there is that kind of constant deal diligence and process and rigor that you go through. Do you think that's a skill set that translates well?
I think it absolutely is, but you can very easily get shut out of the M&A room by being too risk averse, frankly. Okay. So as a risk management professional, and I see myself in many ways when I zoom out and talk to people who aren't in cyber about what I do, although I'm, a business person, a security practitioner, zoom out, there's a lot of risk management here. I see the world in terms of risk, and I need to chill out sometimes and say, why are we doing this? And what is the business reason for doing this? Because being involved in dozens and dozens of M&A transactions in my career so far, the goal of diligence is not to scuttle a deal. I mean, if there's a massive red flag, 100%, you have to bring it to the forefront. But everyone in the deal will then ask the question well, is there a dollar figure that we're putting to this? Like the classic Yahoo acquisition where we find out the breach afterwards. It's like, what was the dollar impact? And can we move funds around in terms of the consideration of the deal to account for this? If so, great that we found out about it, but let's keep going. If not, and it's catastrophic, let's take a step back. What I find with our peers in the security industry is we're very good at pointing out the risk, not as good at charting the path forward and saying, yeah, we can do this, but here's the way we need to accommodate it. And so, the skill set lends itself, but you can't go too far to the other extreme because you'll very quickly be shut out of the room if you don't understand the broader context of why we're raising these risks. It's not just to be, Dr. No, which the security team kind of has a reputation for being in many companies.
So it's actually a good lesson to kind of bring that as a CISO, right? You should almost think like an M&A artist, right? What are the trade-offs? What is going to drive the business forward? Like assigning dollar numbers to certain situations and risks. So it's almost like a good CISO will probably be very good at M&A. The traditional CISO that we read and talk about and gets posted out LinkedIn every day, probably not very good at M&A.
So it's actually interesting. I want to go back to that point before we transition to our next topic. We talked about the Yahoo breach, right? That was kind of like the seminal one where we had an M&A happening, and then the breach was discovered, and the cybersecurity community said, this is why we need better diligence in the M&A. I was around for the news cycle when that happened. I wasn't anywhere near the deal. But I went back and looked at the numbers of that. In the deal, when Verizon was looking to acquire Yahoo's internet business, they were going to do it for $350 million, and my notes are correct. So they reduced the amount of they reduced the amount of the acquisition by a couple percentage points. But for the deal overall, they went from this, so they reduced it by $350 million. That was it. And they went from 4.8 billion to 4.4 billion. So I'm not going to trivialize it and call it a rounding error because $350 million is a material amount. But from a cybersecurity perspective, to your point earlier about being a risk manager who can put a dollar on the risk that they have and letting that flow into the deal room so that they can be better informed. Like, truly, that is the answer. Because the worst case scenario that you could find is you'd be like saying the security professional could like uncover is that there's an active breach going on in the acquisition target that you were looking to do. But even that only reduced the dollar amount ultimately from 4.8 to 4.4, right? So by $350 million. So all that to say, it's that even in like kind of a worst case scenario, it was still just $350 million that they cut off that to compensate for that particular deal.
Just 350 mil.
Yep.
Yeah. A cool 350 mil. But I think that's the point, right? Like if the deal still makes sense, you're going to get it done. And our job as practitioners, whether we are the people, and I say practitioners, if you're acquiring a company and you're acquiring maybe a cyber company or something adjacent, or you're acquiring a non-cyber company but need to do cyber diligence, obviously our job is to figure out what are we not seeing? What is the second order thinking about this company that we can figure out what the risks are? And I think, just to get tactical for a minute, like we have compliance frameworks that are very popular and widespread that make cyber diligence kind of formulaic in a lot of deals, like enterprise B2B procurement. Show me your SOC 2 type 2. Show me a third party assessment and the show me your last pen test and what the findings were and how you remediated them. There's a basic level of diligence that a lot of companies are doing. Taking that next step lower to hands on keyboard, obviously speaking with the person responsible for security and getting into it with them is an important part of this. But, I have friends who are CISOs of public companies who who are quite good at this over the years and have done a lot of, and have got the business buy-in to do threat hunts on targets before close. And so that's kind of the magic, which is to say, great for all this paper diligence, we're going to do it. But if we're going to acquire you, we actually need access to your systems at the right time in the deal. And we're going to satisfy ourselves that nobody's lurking behind the curtain. That's a good practice and a bad practice. And, I don't think there's anything wrong with it from a security perspective, but that means now the onus is on you to find this. And if you don't find something, but it's actually there, your company's turning to you and say, hey, we gave you the threat hunt. Like, you did the threat hunt. And so you got to be careful to say, is any of this guaranteed? We're not necessarily going to be able to find every risk.
That's actually a really good point. It is amazing how much time we spent in the legal language, which was around who has indemnification, what was knowable at that time, what was disclosed. Like, this really matters. So this is not a place for a rookie CISO to go in and start saying, I will find all of the things. Like, that is a way to get burned pretty badly, pretty quickly.
For sure. Well, look, let's talk about the BlackDuck acquisition, bit of a UV plug. Like, let's talk about what it meant for you folks as a business and why you made the decision to move forward with these folks.
For sure. So UltraViolet Cyber, unified security operations services company. And by unified, I mean, we do defensive and offensive. And I think this is just an important distinction because most of the companies and most of the approaches we see in this space are, we do defensive, like we do security operations center, we're an MSSP, we're an MDR, and that's great. There are a lot of great companies in that space. There are also a lot of great offensive security companies doing application security testing, pen testing, CTAM, all of that type of thing. But putting your CISO or security leader hat on, it doesn't really help me when I get the pen test PDF report and I email it over to the SOC manager and say, why didn't you detect this? Or I email it over to the dev leader and say, why are your apps have so many issues with them? These two things should really talk to each other. And that's the fundamental difference about how UV approaches the market. And so we've historically always been doing both of those two things in a concentric circle and getting customers to buy into this vision. But the world has evolved over the past 2 years. And I think it became clear to us that we want to do even more and double down on the AppSec side of offensive security for multiple reasons. But if I had to give one as the top one, look at the volume of code being created over the past year or 2 years compared to historical trends. The types of code that are going into production right now are just objectively less secure than they were. Maybe they will become more secure over time. Maybe there's new models that will come out. I'm not a naysayer on AI that it's not going to be able to create perfect code that is not vulnerable, but we have an insane flood of things being pushed to production right now that have extreme supply chain dependencies, and I'm talking about code generated through Gen AI assisted IDEs. And there's really deep supply chain dependencies in there in terms of reuse of third-party packages, reuse of open source that your developers may not even know that they're using. And so from our perspective, we asked our customer advisory board, where do you think we should go next? How can we support you more? And AppSec was the absolute number one priority. And so really great opportunity that we'd been working on essentially for the entire year of 2025 with a great company, which is BlackDuck,
Yep.
primarily a software company, but had a services division. And, their perspective was we want to focus on software. And, that's another conversation we can have about software versus services in cyber. But fundamentally, did that carve out, did that deal, did a partnership with BlackDuck in terms of going to market together as well, but really bulked up the existing offensive security capabilities at UV, which were fantastic, but with really great capabilities from the BlackDuck services team.
So
That
I don't
makes
think we're going to
sense.
let you off this podcast until we can talk about software and services coming together. So just that's coming. So Stu and I were talking about this a few podcast episodes ago. We were talking about this research that came out from Aprio. So they dropped an article early September when this is what you were describing earlier. So there is this market need for tighter feedback systems because you have this generative AI coding coming along, these coding assistants, and we're building out these AI generating pipelines, and love the promise of where this is going to go. But what we're also seeing, and this is what the research from Aprio was showing, was they saw a 4x increase in the velocity. And you kind of expect that. You're like, all right, cool. Now that number breaks down. It looks a little different depending on the architecture of the applications that I can bring in other research for that. But what Aprio was saying was that when you bring in coding agents to help you with your development lifecycle, you will see a 4x increase. But what they also were measuring was the rejection rate of pull requests. Like, what was the pull request that was coming forward that had a vulnerability or a security issue that was being gated? And there was a 10x increase in that. So this increase, it wasn't linear, right? The quality of the code was meeting standards. And so we see a lot of that. So I've seen other research papers off Archive, which is 40% of the code that we see that's generated when you have a code generated infrastructure that's not tuned with security in mind, it will generate 40% of the code will be vulnerable. Some studies will bring that up to 60%. Right. And so it really is about that architecting of the end to end. And it's kind of what you think you're describing, and maybe like the pitch, the segment you're going after, which is how do you bring the security and technically integrate it along the pipeline? I think is really interesting, this carve out that you guys have done in this purchase of BlackDuck. Do you see a world where we're going to see more cybersecurity products integrated into the Gen AI or the coding assistant, the coding pipelines, or what I'm calling agentic coding systems? Are you going to see more security products there? Or does this now become, and also I'd love to get your take on what is the role of the application security engineer, right? What do these talented people that have been doing their job for the last 10, 15 years, how does that start to shift with the change of technology here?
Yeah. So the role shift, I'll start with the people and the roles, because I think this is probably the most interesting part of the shift. And it's similar to other industries being disrupted by AI, where white collar jobs, let's call them, are being disrupted. It really just elevates the level of work that professionals will be able to do if they have that expertise. So the AppSec engineer, I think, is safe for many reasons, but the work that they're doing will be different. Like, threat modeling is more important than ever. The inputs that go into the work that developers are doing and helping developers with the new toolboxes that they have create secure code is probably the most important thing right now, because it's no longer about, do I have sufficient people to write the code that I need to create, to meet my deadlines. It's not about that. Like, scarcity of developers isn't really a thing anymore. If anything, there's a glut of developers. I'm sorry to say that, but you look at all of the hiring statistics and even computer science grad rates and first year jobs, it's like there is a massive desert of first and second year grads trying to become developers, because they're just there's no entry level developer hires anymore. It's gone.
Yeah.
And so you have to learn to do the scarce thing, which is the architecture and just the enablement that relates to AppSec. And so your first question was, though, will security products get more integrated? And I think that's the dream. It's like, why don't we have a security first IDE that just has a really good autocomplete that is like the AppSec engineer autocomplete? That's like, it's just so much more complicated than that. And again, I'm not saying that this will never be solved, but it's like the thing that I'm working on when I'm writing my piece is dependent on so many other things that have already been written in my company and third parties. And my autocomplete security assistant may tell me, hey, you've got an issue here, but it's related to something that someone else did. And so in the end, I think this is like a people and an organization problem as much as it is a technology problem.
Mhm.
And having the magical security product that writes really good secure code for you isn't necessarily, it's not solving the root cause issue, but it is potentially making the individual developer write better code if you follow that.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a magic bullet like with anything else, but as the tools get better, we will eventually catch up and this problem will be solved. For now, we need a lot of application security testing, especially from a regulatory
Yeah.
perspective, before any of this stuff gets into production because it's a bit of a mess.
Has it driven a spike in business, do you think? Kind of people rushing to produce code very quickly and deploying?
Yes. And we're seeing it. We're seeing demand trends. So there's two competing trends, the headwind and one's a big tailwind and one's a bit of a
Yeah.
headwind. And so the tailwind is exactly what we're discussing, but UV services, large global enterprises, Global 2000, as well as US federal government. And these types of organizations are not taking the thing that you created on Lovable and putting it into production tomorrow. It's a bit more of a gate before you get to that. But
Yeah.
what's happening is you have non-traditional business stakeholders creating applications at a much higher rate, and
Yeah.
that's causing people consternation. The other huge risk is SaaS being created in this way that just looks like SaaS through ordinary
Yeah.
SaaS procurement. And it's like marketing's like, hey, we got this app we want to use to enable our customer experience. And there isn't, again, not to say it's more or less secure than it was before. I mean, right now it's less, but how was that app created? And is it just the facsimile of something else that was created on Lovable? Shout out to Lovable, great product. I'm just
Yep.
giving you an example here. So that's the tailwind. It's powering us to have more testing and it's creating these gates. There is a headwind to services companies, at least, which we have to acknowledge, which is AI enabled testing, which is
Yeah.
a good thing. And, like we equip our testers at UV with the best tools in their own toolbox for them to be really efficient at their jobs. I do have a lot of customers coming to me and saying, how do you go faster? Why is this pen test taking 10 days on this app? Why can't it take 1 day?
Yeah.
There's this VC backed company that told me they can do this all for a fraction of the price. And my answer to them is, we use those tools. We've tested all of them. We equip our people with the best tools in the toolbox, and we'll continue to get more efficient. And I think that's the way it's going to work. But no regulator right now accepts fully automated AI testing as
Yeah.
proof of security in that manner. And
Uh,
so maybe we'll get there one day, but we're not there yet.
It should
Yeah.
be part of the
No.
stack. It shouldn't be your stack.
Yeah, exactly that. How is this
True.
how is this driving strategy and go to market efforts for UV? Because it's a new world, right? Like has it made a significant change with how you do business?
Yeah, well, I think go to market, it's a challenge for everyone in that you don't want to overwhelm your buyer. We've heard and seen so much about, oh, the CISO gets all these pitches that are not relevant to them. And so I think, in the larger organizations, what isn't talked about as much publicly is that the buyers aren't the CISOs, really. I mean, there's strategic alignment with CISOs and we love our
Yeah.
CISOs, but there's
Mhm.
a lot of people at the management level and individual contributors who are buyers. And so our go-to-market approach is really supporting those people and saying, what are your metrics? And some will come, there's a technical product manager at one of our customers who's responsible for all third-party pen testing, who I had a conversation with recently and said, here are my metrics in terms of efficiency and vendor consolidation. How can you help me get there? And so our go-to-market approach is a mix of that. There's an educational aspect to it, which is let us tell you how this industry is evolving and where we think the industry is going, the offensive and defensive united. Like that's an educational sale. Many CISOs I've sit down with say, yeah, I completely agree with the philosophy, but most of them are not saying to me, give me the whole package. They're saying, oh, we'll try out the offensive. And if we like that, maybe we'll try out the defensive. And then over time, we'll see them work together. And so there's a bit of an educational side to it. There's just an activity side to it. So the go-to-market has changed because there's a new conversation to have around this whole AppSec conundrum we've just been discussing. So that's really good for go-to-market. I mean, I think activity, something new to talk to your customers about is always good. But then there's just the fundamentals of hygiene. The hygiene side of security has not gone away, even though all these fancy and exciting things are happening. So managed security services, whether you do it in-house and run your own SOC and what tools you're using in SOC automation. We all saw RSA conference this year, SOC automation was probably the number one topic. A lot of the problems are still the same, even if we have, the agentic SOC now, which is really just SOAR on steroids, but nothing's plug and play in security. That's one of my, I'm like all about the mantras, and that's one of my mantras. And so whether you do it in-house or whether you do it with specialists like us, you've got solutions you need to put in. And I think we're very focused on those fundamentals and that hygiene as the market continues to evolve with new things as well.
So I want to follow up on that and talk a little bit more about this go-to-market for cybersecurity vendors broadly. There's at least 4,000 cybersecurity companies inside the US. Many of them bringing the same features or overlapping feature sets. They have all areas of expertise, but there's overlapping feature sets. As a CISO, like you get to sample all 4,000 because they all come into your inbox about every week and it kind of blows things up. But what I wanted to get your I have this belief that like the best cybersecurity companies are ones who don't step in and like sell protection, but more to what you were saying is they sell measurable improvement. What are the metrics that are mattering to you, economic buyer? And then how do we help incrementally improve off of that? So with that, like you're in this advisory space for a while, you've advised a lot of different companies on this space. So what do you see are some of the characteristics? What separates security vendors and partners that like really earn the trust versus those that spend their money and they fade out? Like when you're working with leadership teams, how are you guiding them? And what are the biggest mistakes you're seeing on how cybersecurity companies in their go-to-market?
Yeah, it's such an interesting and evolving situation. And it's a push and pull between the factors that drive our industry, like investment, VC investment, private equity investment, which is very good for our industry. So I'm a big supporter of all of our investor friends out there, many of whom you rattled off at the beginning of this cast, which was nice. But let's just acknowledge for a minute that the investment dollars drive innovation and the end user buyer dollars, put food on the table for many of us. So first of all, I approach every conversation with an acknowledgement of that. I had a really interesting customer conversation recently with a great customer of mine who, after this acquisition, we were sitting down and I was in their office explaining to them why we did this deal. Because it's, first of all, super important to be face to face with people. Not everyone wants to do it, but my team, we have in our executive team Slack channel, we have a running table of where everybody is every week at which customer and where, because it's super important to us culturally. And we do this throughout the entire 800 person company as well at UV, be in front of your customer because that's where you can help solve problems. So I think in answer to your question, first of all, showing up is really important. But the story is that this customer said to me, really interesting pitch and really interesting company, and you've done some great work for us, but I've never heard of UltraViolet before. And like we all have decades of experience in security and we've never heard of you. And that's super concerning to me. And at first I was like, this isn't going well. But I immediately just said, you've never heard of us because we spend nothing on marketing. Like we probably should spend more on marketing, but every one of our dollars is going back into training our people, going to the right conferences so that they can bring the innovation to you, traveling to see you and putting the right tools. It's investment back into the company. And I think that is something that has gone a bit the inverse of that has gone a bit hog wild in our industry, which is who are the names that we know, the ones that have the biggest boost, the ones that spend the most money. Respect to those people. I don't run a VC backed company. It's a company that is owned by a private equity fund, and those are different economics. And we're not out there spending a lot on a big RSA booth. And so in answer to your question, I think it's about results. Like it's about showing up and it's about results. I don't expect a customer to meet me for the first time and ink a multi-million-dollar security outsourcing deal to transform their SOC. I would love it if that happened.
Yep.
Sometimes it does. Sometimes there are RFPs that we're involved in where we can demonstrate that. But what I say to most new customers is the best way to get to know us is to work with us. Like give us a shot on something new that's coming up. You want to see how we compare to your existing vendor, and either we deliver for you or we don't. And I think that's also the difference between services. We're a tech-enabled service. You know, we have an R&D team, we have our own platform. So it's not only service, but it's definitely a services company. That's the difference between service and software. Although you can do a POC with software, with respect to all my software colleagues out there, you know, once you buy that software, enablement, integration, optimization, not really the top priority of every software company. It should be because it
Correct.
increases their net retention and it
Absolutely.
makes people renew. But we've all seen that. Why do people have so many products on the shelves? Why are they so frustrated with the software pitches? It's because people buy something on the promise of it solving their problem and then it doesn't work. And so
Yeah.
for me, it's all about results. The time to seeing the result and determining if it's a good partner is actually much shorter for services than it is for product. And that's why I love this industry, though. There's a lot of great competition, a lot of great people out there. And really, you either get the job done or you don't. And
Yeah.
customers will vote with their dollars.
And I will always say, like, I deal with humans all the time. That's my job, right? Buyers are far more emotional than they think they're very rational. But like people buy on emotion, and some of the great triggers are like peace of mind, right? Like they're buying peace of mind of like, cool, if I bring these guys, it's not my problem anymore, which is, I know it is, but it's kind of, all right, you deal with this and I can send a message and it's taken care of. And convenience, right? Like how easy are you folks to deal with? So I think they're the main points. And look, going back to the marketing piece, I'm not so sure that like return of investment is actually there. Like I look at the price of a booth at a Black Hat or an RSA, and I think I don't know that it's there. Like honestly, some of these events seem ludicrous. People hire like professional DJs. It's millions and millions and millions of dollars. And the companies that can actually afford to do it, businesses have heard of you anyway, right? Like we know what McDonald's is, and if we drive by one, we'll get one. Like, do you actually need a TV commercial? And again, I'm sure there's deeper like research and stuff done on it, but I don't know. Like I know what the price of some people spend at Black Hat and RSA, and I'm like, is $7 million
Yeah.
worth it? Like, you tell me. Like, I don't know.
Well, what drives people to do that, though, is a very bottoms up pressure. And we all know, you know, the salespeople and some kind of security salespeople get a bad rap. It's a really hard job. And
Yep.
it's a really hard job to do well. And I can tell you from building sales teams and working with salespeople and training them, one of the number one complaints you'll get from salespeople if your company spends no money on marketing is nobody knows who I am when I get in the room. And so I think what a lot of companies do, and you know, my friends who are CMOs will tell me this is good return on investment, is if a salesperson calls and they get the meeting, or maybe the reason they got the meeting was because somewhere along the way, the buyer was primed to say, I've heard of that company. Oh yeah, they're legit. They're not just some random company I've never heard of before. I think that's really hard to measure. I think there's other ways to do that. Like one of the best things about the industry that we're in is the field level conference scene, the B sides, or even just the meetups side. And so like I have a colleague of mine who's in Hyderabad in India who just presented this week to a Cloud Security Alliance local chapter meeting. That's gold, you know, first of all, really good value to fellow practitioners, really good experience for a practitioner to step up and do a presentation. It's not an RSA talk. It's not a Black Hat talk, but we're going to promote it on social media in the same way. And I think to the
Yep.
buyer who's the technical product manager or the head of AppSec, that's even more credible than the RSA booth.
Those
Agreed.
brand moments are so important. As you're mentioning, the colleague in your company who spoke at the CSA, like the ability for that thought leadership to happen, that becomes this object. This becomes a deposit into the bank account of your brand, 100%. And it does in the right way. As you're mentioning, most people, when they go to buy, they've heard before they take the first meeting, they've heard about the company 6 to 7 times before they'll take the call. And once they take the call, then they look around and say like, do I trust this company? And that trust is such an interesting word in the human language, right? It's such a deep emotion, and brand has such an important place to play with that. When I was giving a talk to some of our go-to-market teams here at Sysdig, and I was like, you have to remember, CISOs don't buy software to solve a problem. They buy career insurance. They're like trying to get their work done, but in a way that if it fails, because there's this asymmetricness to it. If everyone delivers and shows up and does they did, then we just achieved a contract. Great. We move forward. Note that nothing happened. If anyone drops the ball, the CISO has to pick up that ball and then deal with the second and third degree impacts of that. So
for what it's worth, that services is thankless because the CISO will take all the credit if it goes well, but they will do that. They will point the finger when things don't go well, and it's the classic. Like obviously, no one got fired.
We're a deeply
hiring
emotional group. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's also why you have so many long-term relationships matter so much. And there is this cadence of, I have a colleague or a partner or a customer who's been CISO here, and they move jobs. And when you move jobs and you have a problem to solve, you call the trusted Rolodex to say, hey, like, I need this person, I need this type of service. Because it's really, you're not just going to go out there and do an RFP, cold RFP, and say, let's find what the best product is for my solution. In many cases, you're trying to mitigate your own risk by using people that you trust.
Connor, how many times have we ran that playbook?
Yes, totally. 100%. Ira, before we move to our next segment though, I just need you to can you define what a Rolodex is for the rest of our audience?
Have you ever heard of that software? There is a CRM called Rolodex now.
Okay. There you go. There you go. All right, guys. So I want to bring us home with one of my favorite segments of the show, which is the Monday morning advice. And so we all heard of Monday morning quarterbacks. So let's do this. So this obviously we drop our episodes on Friday. People listening over the weekend, they're going to arrive into the office on Monday morning ready to go. So with that, what is some of the advice that you would give the security leaders who are listening to this? What's the one thing a security leader could do on Monday to make themselves or their teams operate 10% better? So Stu, I'll go to you first. And then over to you, Ira. So Stu, what's on your mind?
So I'll do life advice first, which is don't negotiate on buying a house while you're out drinking, which I may or may not have not followed last night, but here we go. My second bit of advice is have a good Rolodex, right? You have a list of people that you can call. A problem shared is a problem halved, but having the right list of folks that can come in and solve problems for you that you have that trust with is so important.
Ira, how about yourself? What's the 10%? How could we be 10% better on Monday?
So this is easy for me, especially in context of our conversation today. Get smarter on your business and your customer's business. It amazes me how little homework people do. The internet is this amazing thing that has a lot of public information about it. Even if you're a public company, there's no excuse. Like, have you watched in detail the last earnings and the last several quarter earnings to understand the financials and what's happening in your business and what the pain points are and what the success points are? Even if it's not public, who owns the company? What are their incentives? What's happening in this business? It will make your job so much easier by having that context. And so my number one piece of Monday morning advice would be do that extra work, get smarter on your business to enable your own goals.
I love that. That is some great advice. I'll round us out just by saying, make sure you have time this week to take care of your health. I'm coming off of 2 days of being sick, as my voice feels a little raspy. And I'm just like, it's a great reminder. You can't perform, you can't lead, you can't do anything if you're stuck in bed. So take care of your health and make sure that is a priority going into this week. Ira, that was great insight on just the amount of public information there is and how we as security leaders need to prioritize the leader part of it. And that's the business leader part of it, getting in to know our business, our customers, especially if we're a CISO of a technology company that is selling cybersecurity products or services to the market. That's really good insight. So with that, Ira Goldstein leads UltraViolet Cyber as the executive chair and CEO and is a founder of Kernel Advisory, where he's guided dozens of cyber transactions and post-merger integrations. Previously, he was the SVP and COO of Herjavec Group. He scaled global services and corporate development. He also serves on boards, including the Rogers Cybersecure Catalyst. Ira, thank you so much for joining the show today.
Thanks, guys. Great time.
Ton of fun. Thanks, Ira.
And if you like what you heard today, please give Zero Signal a follow on your favorite podcast app. Leave us a review and share this with another security leader in your network. It really helps the community grow. So we'd love to hear from you. Drop us a comment or a note or tag us on in LinkedIn with your thoughts on today's topic. Until next time, thank you for listening to Zero Signal.